Menstruation and Brewing. Have you ever pretended to be sick to avoid going to school or work? Well, you're not alone. Even the ancient Egyptians did this sort of thing. Imagine, scientists from the British Museum stumble upon a huge stone fragment called an ostracon. There were records on it that date back to about 1250 BC. And do you know what they found there? Exactly! Excuses ancient Egyptian workers used to get away from work. This stone journal is maintained 280 days a year and lists the names of 40 workers, and next to each name are the reasons why they missed work. Someone is bitten by a scorpion, someone is caring for a sick mother. Interesting, right? Some of the reasons sound pretty funny to us. For example, some workers left work to look after their wife or daughter during their periods, and the workers also had to take time off to embalm dead relatives. It was a complex and long process that required attention and time. And of course, let's not forget the beer. In ancient Egypt, beer was a nutritious drink enjoyed by children and adults alike. And yes, the workers sometimes took days off to make it. So guys, if you ever want to take the day off to brew beer, remember, even the ancient Egyptians can envy you. Carvings of incredible beauty. Meet John Matthews, an ordinary guy who loves to look for old treasures in the fields of Wales. One day, when he was rummaging through the fields as usual, John stumbled upon something unusual. What he found was older than anything he had ever seen. We are talking about the treasures of the Roman time and the Iron Age. Experts say they may point to a hitherto unknown Roman settlement right there in the field. At first, John did not even understand what he had discovered, but he knew that it was something important. Calling a local archaeologist, John helped meticulously dig up a jar and vessel fixture brought there by the Celts and sent them off for study. A few weeks later, our lucky hunter joined the team of archaeologists for deeper excavations, and you know what they found? Archaeologists have found a bowl decorated with a bull's face as well as other amazing items. John, who had been looking for treasure for 10 years, was amazed by the beauty of the artifacts found. The treasures that John had discovered confirm one important fact: we never know exactly what might be hidden underground. Perhaps there, right under our feet, amazing treasures are waiting in the wings that can reveal to us the secrets of the past. And all we need to find them is a keen eye, a bit of luck, and of course a sense of adventure like our hero John. Prehistoric lizard 10 meters long. Imagine you're exploring the Texas wilderness and suddenly you stumble upon a huge petrified tail. This is exactly what happened to paleontologist Stephen Cruz of the Peru American Museum of Nature and Science. While walking through North Texas, he noticed a piece of spine sticking out of the ground. But it was not an ordinary lizard spine, but a real ancient sea monster. Continuing the excavation, scientists discovered a fossilized skull, lower jaw, and even more vertebrae of a giant. They realized that they had found the remains of an ancient lizard 10 meters long. Can you imagine? It's like 5 adults lying one after another. And this giant lizard lived in the seas that were there 80 million years ago. Ron Tykoski, museum director and curator of vertebrate paleontology, was not surprised by the find. He explained that in those distant times, almost all of Central Texas was underwater. According to him, warm seawaters and an abundance of food created ideal conditions for the life of such giants as mosasaurs. Modern monitor lizards are the descendants of these huge carnivorous lizards that lived alongside dinosaurs during the Cretaceous. The work at the excavation site has not yet been completed, and scientists are looking forward to fall season to return and continue their excavations. Who knows what else they'll find? DNA of a woman from Paleolithic jewelry. Imagine you find an ancient deer tooth pendant and ask yourself who wore this pendant, who owned it. German researchers know the answer to this question, and it's all thanks to DNA. In the Nisava cave, where the pendant was found, scientists were able to extract and analyze the DNA of a woman who wore the pendant about 20,000 years ago. Judging by the DNA, she was a close relative of people who lived at the same time but further east in Siberia. During excavations, archaeologists are very careful with the finds so as not to contaminate them with modern DNA. They put on gloves and masks, and the finds themselves are immediately placed in clean bags. The soil is removed from the objects already in the laboratory. This method of work proved to be effective. The researchers were able to extract not only the DNA of the deer from whose tooth the pendant was made, but also a large amount of DNA of the woman herself. Scientists have found as much of the woman's DNA as would normally be found in a human tooth. This means that now scientists can learn about people not only from their remains, but also from the objects they used. This opens up new possibilities for studying our ancestors. However, here's the downside. This method only works on fresh finds, so old artifacts that have been in museums for many years are still a mystery. Meet a new round in the science of archaeology and genetics. Now we can literally touch history, studying not only the subject itself, but also learning about the person who used it. It's like a time machine that allows us to connect ancient objects with specific people and uncover the secrets of the past. Mayan VIP tomb. Imagine you're an archaeologist and in Mexico, in the depth of the ancient city of Palenque, you discover a secret burial chamber of the Mayan civilization filled with unique and mysterious objects. Such an adventure happened to scientists from the National Institute of Anthropology and History in Mexico. Palenque was one of the most majestic and mysterious cities of the Maya. It was also called La Camha. This ancient city is located in the Mexican state of Chiapas. During restoration work in Palenque, archaeologists discovered a burial chamber. Inside was the skeleton of a man laid face up with his head turned to the north. This was typical for the burial of very important people in Palenque. But that is not all. Large ceramic bowls were found in the tomb, which the Maya used as offerings for the dead. They believed the deceased would eat from these bowls in the afterlife. And in the same tomb, they found a second burial, the skeleton of a woman. Next to her lay green figurines made of malachite. The Maya believed that this stone had powerful spiritual powers. Palenque, although it was not the largest Mayan city, but its architecture is simply amazing. Thanks to the hieroglyphic inscriptions found in the city, scholars have been able to trace the history of the Palenque dynasty from the 5th to the 8th centuries AD. So the ancient secrets continue to be revealed thanks to the hard work of archaeologists, and each new discovery is another page in the history of our world. Stone Age dagger. Imagine you're 12 years old and you're walking through your schoolyard and discover a real dagger from the Stone Age. Such a story happened to a little girl from Norway. His name is Alice. She was playing and noticed a strange piece of stone on the ground. Alice showed her find to the teacher, who immediately realized that it was no ordinary stone. The teacher contacted the archaeologists and they confirmed. Alice found a real dagger that is already 3,700 years old. The dagger turned out to be 12 centimeters long and made of flint, a stone that does not exist in Norway. Therefore, scientists think that the dagger came from Denmark through the North Sea. Indeed, in those days, people often gave such daggers to the gods as a token of gratitude. Archaeologists spent a lot of time in the schoolyard hoping to find something else from that distant time, but unfortunately, they did not find anything else. Interestingly, this dagger was made during the New Stone Age, when people learned how to make tools from stone and also began to grow plants and animals. This was the time when people stopped roaming the world and started building their first villages. The Stone Age in Norway lasted a very long time, from 10,000 to 1,800 BC, and it was at this time that hunters and gatherers began to settle on farms. Instead of the tomb of Cleopatra, a geometric miracle. Just imagine, you're an archaeologist and are looking for the lost tomb of the famous Egyptian queen Cleopatra. And suddenly, instead of a tomb, you discover a giant tunnel right under the city of Taposiris Magna in Egypt. This is exactly what happened to our explorer heroes. This tunnel is simply amazing. It goes to a depth of 13 meters and stretches as far as 1,305 meters deep. That's more than 13 football fields, one after the other, and its height, at least 2 meters, which is even taller than the height of the average person. Scientists have noticed that this mysterious Egyptian tunnel is very similar to another famous ancient tunnel, Eve Pelinos, which was carved into the rock on the island of Samos in Greece around the 6th century BC. But what is the secret of this tunnel? Why was it built and what does it hide? Scientists do not yet know the answer to these questions, but they are confident that they can solve this mystery. And while the researchers were exploring the tunnel, they found some amazing things in it. For example, coins with the names and images of Cleopatra herself and Alexander the Great. They also found figurines of the goddess Isis, who was greatly respected by Cleopatra. Near the tunnel, in several burials, they found the remains of people who lived in Greco-Roman times. Maybe Cleopatra is also buried somewhere nearby in a similar tomb. If scientists find her tomb, it will be the biggest archaeological discovery of the 21st century. Statues that sing. Once, among the sand dunes of Egypt, near the city of Luxor, you will notice two giant stone figures. They guard the pharaoh's ancient sarcophagus like two majestic and silent guardians. But one day, after a big earthquake in 27 BC, one of them began to sing. Yes, you heard it right. He began to make a sound like a whistle and a groan at the same time. Thus was born the legend of the singing Colossi of Memnon. No, this is not a myth. For centuries, people have heard this mysterious melody. Imagine, the sound became so famous that it was even used as a reference when tuning musical instruments. Hundreds, no, thousands of curious souls came from all over the world to hear the sound of these 700-ton giants. Scientists, of course, could not pass by such a miracle. They struggled for a long time over the riddle of the singing Colossus, but could not give a satisfactory answer. They suggested that the musical phenomenon is related to the dew that evaporates in the morning in the porous sandstone, from which the statues are made, and under the influence of wind and rising temperature, create this unique sound. The place where these colossi stand is called the City of the Dead. One of the most spectacular Egyptian temples is located here, where the pharaoh and his entire family are buried. And by the way, these two similar statues depict Pharaoh Amenhotep III. Each of them weighs 720 tons and reaches a height of 18 meters. But in 199 AD, after a not too accurate restoration, the sound of the statue suddenly stopped. People took this as a bad sign and were sure that it was a harbinger of disasters and wars. When you are in Egypt, be sure to visit the City of the Dead and come face to face with these great giants. I am sure that this will forever remain in your memory. I just recently was next to them and they aroused my admiration. Hand axes 300,000 years old. In the desert of Oman, where the sun shines brighter than anywhere else, two teams of archaeologists have made amazing discoveries. They found ancient stone axes that people used thousands of years ago when they first came from Africa. It's so cool, isn't it? But that's not all. They also found rock paintings and ancient burials. These finds, like jigsaw puzzles, will help scientists put together a picture of Oman's history so that we can all learn more about how people lived then. We found all this in the desert of Rab al-Khali, which is called the Empty Quarter. Here, scientists even discovered an old dune and a riverbed when there was much more water in these places. And another amazing discovery, scientists have found the eggs of an ancient species of ostriches, which has long since died out. And the second team found traces of an ancient salmon, which was built in the 3rd millennium BC. This place became an important trade center during the Bronze Age, and all these findings will help us better understand how the climate has changed and how people have adapted to these changes. In fact, a great piece of history is hidden under the desert sands. Beer instead of water. Do you know that in ancient times people liked to drink beer or ale, especially during dinner? But it wasn't just the beer we know today. It was thicker, more nourishing, and people drank it for a reason, to get the extra calories that were so necessary for a working person. But what about water, you might ask? Yes, water was available to everyone. Even the inhabitants of overcrowded medieval cities. Imagine London, where since 1236 there has been a system of drinking fountains located throughout the city. And so it was in most major cities of that time. However, water in those days had a strange reputation. It was considered a drink for the poor and sick, that is, those who could not afford to sip beer or wine at dinner. But on a hot day, everyone drank water, not even thinking that it could violate sanitation standards. And yes, before industrialization, most of the streams were clean and you could drink from them without boiling. But in large rivers, especially those flowing through large cities, one could find any garbage left over from the life of the townspeople. That is why in cities people prefer to use wells. Did you know that a system of direct sewerage into the river once led to a giant disaster known as the Great Stink of London? These are the interesting stories behind the usual drinks that we used to see every day. Semiprecious stones in the sewers. Right under our feet, in the English city of Carlisle, archaeologists have discovered amazing ancient treasures from the time of the Roman Empire. Just think, exactly on the spot where the British now play cricket, once there were large pools of Roman bath. These baths were very popular among soldiers and their wives who lived in the 3rd century. Do you know what our archaeologist friends found in the drainage channels of these baths? They found a whole collection of semi-precious stones that seemed to have accidentally fallen and were lost in the seething waters of the bath. Imagine, these baths were like royal palaces, big enough to accommodate 1,000 soldiers and their wives. It's time to dig, and here's what archaeologists found. Hundreds of glass beads, dozens of women's hairpins, ancient coins, and of course, these amazing stones. A total of 36 were found. These were small but very beautiful stones carved from amethyst, jasper, and other semi-precious minerals. Each of them depicted various Roman gods and goddesses. But the question remains, how did these decorations get into the bath drainage system? In ancient Rome, people loved to wear rings with beautiful gemstones. However, these stones were kept on the rings thanks to a special glue, which unfortunately could weaken in hot water. And so, while the Romans enjoyed their bath, the stones probably simply fell out of the rings and fell into the sewer. But then why didn't they just leave the decorations at home, you may ask? Good question! In ancient Roman bath, before entering the pool, people took off their clothes, remaining only in special sandals. Some people hired servants to look after their belongings, but there weren't many of them. In most cases, the attendants of the bath watched over the stuff. However, there were occasional thefts, and some Romans decided to take the risk of taking all their valuables with them to the bath. And it seems that some of them have been lost forever, leaving us with magnificent artifacts to study and admire. Perhaps under our feet there are mysterious jewelry of antiquity, which one of you will definitely discover someday. Write in the comments if you dreamed of finding the treasure of precious coins or ancient treasures, and be sure to tell us what was the most valuable thing you found throughout your life. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. The oldest diamond in the world. Now I will tell you again about precious stones, only very ancient ones. The story will not just be about a diamond, but about the oldest diamond on Earth. Just like in movies or treasure books, isn't it? An international team of scientists discovered this unique stone in Russia at the Udachnaya diamond deposit, which translates as lucky. Here the name itself speaks of greater luck for the miners. Measuring only 0.3 millimeters, this diamond is smaller than the head of a pin. It lived a very long life, and scientists were able to determine its age using sophisticated methods that sound like real magic. Isotope dating. Scientists said that the diamond was formed deep underground at a depth of about 140 kilometers. It was very hot there, about 900 degrees Celsius, and the pressure was huge, 37,000 times more than on the Earth's surface. A diamond is 3.7 billion years old. But the most amazing thing is that this diamond deposit is located 20 kilometers from the Arctic Circle, very close to the place where polar bears live. It was here in 1955 that the Soviet geologist Vladimir Shukin discovered this lucky pipe, and then a whole city was built here for diamond mining. And in this pipe, huge diamonds were found, one of which was named after the great Russian poet Alexander Pushkin. Ancient Astra tomb. In Spain, in the place where the sleeping giant lives, archaeologists have discovered a treasure that is 5,000 years old. And the sleeping giant is actually a huge rock in the region of Andalusia. The treasure they found is an incredible stone tomb called Piedras Blancas, which translates to white stone. And so archaeologists are sure that this tomb was built at the same time when the most ancient megaliths were created in Antiquera. This is about 3000 BC. They even found ceramic offerings next to it. But what is even more amazing is that this tomb was built for a reason, so that it is precisely aligned with the stars. Yes, just like in a sci-fi movie. This means that ancient people used it not only as a tomb, but also as an observation platform for studying the starry sky. They knew where and when important astronomical events such as the solstice and equinox would occur, and most likely they held special rituals and celebrations at this place. These amazing discoveries shows how smart and resourceful our ancestors were. They created incredible structures that served not only as a refuge for the dead, but also as a tool for understanding the world around them. And here we are, thousands of years later, continuing to learn from them thanks to these amazing discoveries. Stone road at the bottom of the sea. Have you ever heard of roads that are underwater? So, archaeologists have discovered just such road in the depth of the sea near the island of Korčula in Croatia. This stone road, located at a depth of about 5 meters underwater, is over 7,000 years old. Imagine, people who lived long before the construction of the Egyptian pyramids could walk on it. Scientists believe that the road once connected the island of Korčula with a part of the land, which is now flooded by the waters of the Adriatic Sea. It's kind of complicated, isn't it? But imagine a road that goes from the island straight into the sea and disappears into its depth. Isn't that cool? This road was so large that its width reached 4 meters. Archaeologists claim that it could have been built by one of the ancient civilizations, possibly the Quark culture. The researchers discovered it thanks to satellite images, and now they are trying to find out exactly where this mysterious road led. Scientists have even found an artificially created island on this underwater road. They collected wooden fragments from the top of an underwater hill that once had a settlement. Radiocarbon analysis has shown that these fragments are dated to the 5th century BC. With the help of these discoveries, we can look into the past and imagine how our ancient ancestors lived. They created amazing structures that still amaze us with their complexity and skill. And who knows what else they left for us at the bottom of the ocean. Ancient bakery in Armenia. I will tell you about an amazing discovery which is like from a fairy tale. Imagine an old bakery, a place where they bake delicious rolls and bread. Now imagine that this bakery is not on the corner of your street, but in Armenia. And it is not 10, not 50, or even 100 years old. It is 3,000 years old. Do you believe that bags of flour that were hidden in the ground are still preserved in it? Archaeologists have found this bakery in Matsamor, Armenia, in the remains of a huge building that once housed ovens that unfortunately burned down in a fire. But the most amazing thing is that there were still bags of flour. They looked like ash stains, but the scientists tested them and now they are sure that this is flour. At first, the building was a public place, but then ovens were placed there and it became a bakery where people baked bread from wheat flour. Later, there was a fire and the building collapsed. Only the stone bases of the columns and charred fragments of wooden beams and roof sheathing remained. It is interesting that the flour in those days was used for divinatory purposes. Perhaps this bakery had some special meaning for the people of that time. This is still a mystery, but we hope that scientists will be able to solve it too. So guys, the next time you eat freshly baked bread, remember that bakeries were an important part of the life of our ancestors already 3,000 years ago. Dead wheat grains. We have an exciting story from the world of archaeology ahead of us. Carefully, we are moving back 7,000 years. Have you ever heard of Landshut? This is a small town in Germany where archaeologists recently made an amazing discovery. They dug and suddenly found traces of an ancient settlement of the New Stone Age known as the Neolithic. And do you know what they found there? Under the rubble of a collapsed stone hearth, 5 kilograms of burned cereals were found, a mixture of different types of wheat that were grown in the Neolithic era. Imagine our ancient ancestors used these cereals to make bread, perhaps for winter storage. However, something went wrong, and the oven in which they dried the grains collapsed. The cereals were burned, but they have perfectly preserved to this day. Maybe there was a fire, who knows? This is a very rare and important case for science, because usually organic materials used by people in ancient times are not preserved to this day. These burned cereals were sent to a special laboratory in Vilnius for further study, and this is what they found. 90% of the mixture consisted of cereal which had long since disappeared from the face of the earth. This type of wheat, called new gloom wheat, has only been found a handful of times in the history of archaeological sites. Well, an unfortunate fire 7,000 years ago gave us a unique opportunity to look into the past and learn more about the lives of our ancient ancestors. As they say, a fire is not as terrible as its echo in history. The oldest human footprints in Germany. Imagine a huge lake surrounded by sparse birches and pines and dense thickets of grass on the shore. This is Germany, only about 300,000 years ago. Giant elephants, rhinos, and other majestic creatures of that time came here to drink water, and on the shore of this lake, exactly where the city of Schöningen is now located, the Heidelberg people, our ancient ancestors, left their traces. Scientists accidentally found footprints imprinted on soft silt and then petrified. And this is simply amazing because these traces were left by an adult, a teenager, and even a child. Maybe it was a family outing or someone playing on the beach, we can only guess. Who were these Heidelberg people? They lived in Europe and Africa about 800–130,000 years ago and are considered our distant ancestors, the direct predecessors of the Neanderthals. They chose places to live near lakes or rivers where you could always find something tasty: fruits, berries, mushrooms, and much more. But people were not the only ones who left traces in Schöningen. They also found paw prints of large land animals of that time, extinct species of elephants, and even traces of a rhinoceros. By the way, such prints of rhinoceros were found in Europe for the first time. Ancient birds in the Temple of Isis. Have you ever heard of the ancient city of Pompeii, stuck in time after the eruption of Mount Vesuvius? Today we will travel to it to find out about one interesting find. Archaeologists have made an amazing discovery at the Temple of Isis, one of the most popular goddesses of ancient Egypt. But wait a minute, what is an Egyptian goddess doing here? Oh guys, Isis was so adored that her cult even got to ancient Rome. So even in Pompeii she had her own temple. During excavations, archaeologists discovered something unusual: the remains of birds, many birds. Experts suggest that the ancient inhabitants of Pompeii held a feast in honor of Isis to appease her after the temple had to be downsized. A terrible earthquake damaged the temple in 62, and the priests probably decided that they needed to calm down the offended goddess. Imagine 3 priests in just one day arrange a feast. They eat birds prepared for Isis as a symbol of atonement. On the fiery sacrificial altar, dishes of chickens, geese, and pigeons are prepared, and the remains of a pig and mollusks lie on the floor. All this is an offering to Isis in the hope of her mercy. Interestingly, Isis was often depicted with bird wings. Maybe that's why birds were sacrificed in her honor. This find confirms that birds played an important role in the cult of Isis, so the next time you look at a bird, remember this story. Really, in ancient times, birds could be part of a great religious ritual. Remains of 2 men in Pompeii. And one more story from the ancient city of Pompeii, where a new unique discovery was made. Archaeologists have found the remains of 2 men who scientists believe died during the terrible eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. The skeletons were found under the collapsed wall, and apparently these people were adults, about 50 years old. Anthropologists carefully examined the bones and concluded that they died when the building where they tried to hide from the volcanic eruption collapsed on them. One of them even managed to raise his hand to protect himself from falling debris. In the same room where the remains were found, archaeologists found beads from a necklace and several ancient coins. This will help scientists learn even more about how people lived in those days. Now imagine that Mount Vesuvius, which seemed to be just a beautiful mountain scenery, suddenly erupts, throwing hot lava and poisonous gases into the air. The city of Pompeii, where more than 20,000 people lived, was completely buried under a layer of ash and stones. Most people managed to leave the city before the eruption, but about 2,000 people died. The great eruption of Vesuvius lasted only 17 minutes, but those 17 minutes changed the history of the city forever. Robinson by choice. Saint Helena, remember it? It was there that Napoleon Bonaparte spent the last years of his life. But this tiny island has another story, and no less amazing. Let's imagine an ordinary soldier named Fernand Lopez, who was the only inhabitant of this island for 30 long years before the arrival of Napoleon. Imagine a ship of Portuguese sailors in 1502 accidentally stumbles upon this island. The water here is clean, there are enough trees, but there are no people, only birds in the trees. The sailors decided to build a kind of outpost here. They built houses, brought in cattle, and planted a garden. Well, Lopez became the first inhabitant and lived here most of his life. Now guys, it's going to be a tough one. Once Lopez served in the army and even took part in the conquest of Goa, but having become the commander of the garrison, he went over to the side of the Muslims, and for this he was severely punished. They cut off his hand, cut off his ears and nose, but even with that look, Lopez managed to get the forgiveness of the King of Portugal. However, in his heart, Lopez was ashamed of his disfigured appearance. When his ship docked at St. Helena, he asked to be left there forever. That's how Lopus became a hermit living in a cave, hunting birds and growing vegetables. His story inspired the Portuguese king, who invited Lopus to make a pilgrimage to Rome. The Pope forgives him and offers to fulfill any desire, to which Lopus asks to return to his island, and he lives there until his death in 1545, hospitably helping every arriving sailor. Not only emperors can glorify the island, but also a simple soldier like Fernand Lopus. After all, even among birds and trees, even alone on an abandoned island, you can live a full life. Every ship, every sailor passing by this island remembered Lopus, his hospitality, and his difficult fate. He became part of the history of Saint Helena, along with the famous Napoleon Bonaparte. Skeleton of a woman with an anomaly. Recently, scientists from the University of Lisbon came across an amazing find. They discovered the skeleton of a woman with a huge bone outgrowth on her thigh. This outgrowth, they learned, was formed after a very serious injury, due to which the woman probably had great difficulty in moving. This unique skeleton was found in 2002 on the territory of an ancient necropolis near the Church of St. Julian in Portugal. Here, archaeologists have found the remains of 106 adults and 45 children who lived between 600 and 200 years ago. The woman whose skeleton they discovered was small, only 1.54 meters, but despite all the difficulties, she lived for more than 50 years. When scientists found her, she was lying on her back with her hands resting on her pelvis and her head turned to the right. A very unusual detail was a coin they found on her left forearm. On the woman's thigh was an 8-centimeter outgrowth that formed at the point where the muscle connects the femur and pubic bones. Interestingly, the researchers found no evidence of a hip fracture. This confirms the assumption that the woman suffered a serious muscle injury shortly before her death and lived with it from 6 weeks to a year. This outgrowth, of course, created problems for the woman in terms of mobility, and probably she couldn't make active movements or carry heavy loads. However, as it appears, she was not left to fend for herself. Perhaps she had loved ones or even an entire community who helped her cope with the consequences of the trauma. Accidental discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. Back in 1922, an archaeologist named Howard Carter encountered the greatest discovery of his life. In the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, he discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun, which contained more than 5,000 precious artifacts. But do you know that this expedition might not have happened? Western archaeologists have been exploring the Valley of the Kings since the beginning of the 19th century. When the First World War began, the excavations were suspended and did not achieve great results. At this time, the Earl of Carnarvon, or George Herbert, who financed these excavations, appears on the scene. He was disappointed by the lack of discoveries and was ready to cut off funding. But in 1922, he decided to give a chance to Howard Carter, who was sure that there was something important in the Valley of the Kings. This was the last excavation season in the valley. Working tirelessly, Carter and his team almost lost hope until November 4th, 1922. They opened the tomb of the pharaoh Tutankhamun. It was a huge discovery that surprised the whole world. In the tomb, they found more than 5,000 valuable artifacts that had been lying untouched for 3,000 years. In Carter's book, which was found later, was the address of the Earl of Carnarvon, thanks to whom these excavations took place. The Count, unfortunately, died the year after the discovery from complications from a mosquito bite. 50 years after Carter's discovery, many of the treasures from Tutankhamun's tomb were on display in the British Museum. The exhibition was so popular that it was extended for 6 months. Over 30,000 people visited it in the first week. On the first day of the exhibition, people stood in line for more than 14 hours to see these unique artifacts. Interestingly, in 1921, Howard Carter was a guest of the Earl of Carnarvon in his castle. This is confirmed by the population census of the time. It's funny that the profession of an archaeologist was not mentioned in Carter's documents. He was called an artist. After Tutankhamun's tomb was completely cleared in 1932, Carter decided to retire from archaeology. He died 7 years later. There was an amazing story about how perseverance and self-confidence led to one of the most important discoveries in the history of archaeology. The path to discovery is not always straight and easy, but it is stories like these that show that even the most difficult obstacles can be overcome. Roman military camps in Arabia. With the help of a magical Google Earth map, archaeologists from the famous Oxford University have uncovered the secret of 3 ancient Roman military camps hidden between the countries of Jordan and Saudi Arabia. These camps, built about 2,000 years ago, are surprisingly well preserved to this day. These camps were like temporary castles that Roman soldiers built during their travels. They are arranged in a straight line and are located at a distance of 37 and 44 kilometers from each other, as if they were measured with a ruler. All of them are rectangular in shape and have 2 entrances, like 2 doors in a house, which are located opposite each other. One of the camps, which is located closer to the west, turned out to be even larger than the other 2. But the most interesting thing about this story is that not a single ancient book mentions any military adventures of the Romans in this territory. Scholars think these camps are secret traces of untold battles that took place when the Romans conquered the Nabatean kingdom in 106. After that, this place became known as Arabia Petrea. The Prince of Egypt who really loved his cat. Imagine a royal sarcophagus for a cat. This is just an amazing discovery made by archaeologists. This sarcophagus belonged to a cat who was very fond of Prince Thutmose, the eldest son of Pharaoh Amenhotep III. The prince wanted his furry friend to be well even in death. The goddess Isis herself, spreading her wings, guards the tranquility of the mummy of a cat. And the soul of the cat comfortably settled down at a plentiful table with offerings. On the lid of the sarcophagus is written, "May I find myself among the immortal souls in heaven, for I am Tamet the righteous." Unfortunately, Prince Thutmose could not enjoy the company of his beloved for too long and soon followed her to heaven. After his death, the younger brother of Thutmose became pharaoh, known to us as Akhenaten, husband of the delightful Queen Nefertiti. This amazing sarcophagus was created during the reign of Amenhotep III around 1391-1353 BC and is now kept in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Also, do you know how the Egyptians treated cats? Oh, it was true love. They adored little kittens, revered the goddess Bastid of Bubastis, and feared the majestic and stern Sekhmet, one of the incarnations of Hathor. But unfortunately, times are changing. In the era of the Ramessides, when a period of disorder and corruption set in, people began to run cruel businesses. They simply killed the cats, wrapped them in cloth, and sold them, presenting them as consecrated cat mummies. It was a terrible sacrilege, but alas, documents were found in which this story is confirmed. Stories like these make us even more attached to our pets. Imagine how Prince Thutmose took care of his beloved, giving her eternal rest with the help of such a beautiful and expensive sarcophagus. It's really touching. Also, did you know that the Egyptians were among the first to domesticate cats? Yes guys, they were real cat lovers back when most people saw these animals only as wild predators. And don't forget, every time you pet your cat, you're continuing a tradition that has been going on for thousands of years. Your pets deserve the same love that Prince Thutmose gave his pet Tamit. Keep this in mind and take care of your furry friends. Ancient scissors. In China, they found a royal tomb full of treasures, and in the suburbs of Munich, Germany, they discovered a 2,300-year-old Celtic burial. And that's what they found there. In the Munich district of Sendling, an ordnance disposal team searched for the remains of World War II shells at a construction site. They had no idea that they would discover an ancient tomb. After that, archaeologists from the Bavarian State Office for the Protection of Monuments arrived at the site. They dug up the tomb and found many ancient artifacts, a rolled sword, the remains of a shield, a spearhead, a razor, and even a fibula. But the most surprising thing is the 2,300-year-old Celtic scissors, which are so well preserved that they were described as almost new with a slight sheen. Professor Matthias files that these scissors are so well preserved that they can still be used today. He explained that the excellent condition of the scissors is due to the skill of the Celtic blacksmith who created them 2,300 years ago. Scientists think these scissors could have been used to cut hair, fabrics, or even sheep shearing. Imagine how much history is hidden under our feet. Sometimes it seems that each step can lead us to new incredible discoveries, so be careful, who knows what you yourself may find. Tomb with human remains. Incredible discovery straight from the heart of Amman. Archaeologists have found an ancient stone tomb in the desert, which is over 7,000 years old. Just think about it, it was so long ago that even dinosaurs have already become extinct. In this tomb, they found the remains of dozens of people who lived in those ancient times. This place is located near the city of Nathan in the center of Amman, close to the coast. But do not think that there are palm trees and sandy beaches. Around, only a harsh, rocky desert. Archaeologist Elizabeta Danielisova and her team from the Czech Institute of Archaeology in Prague have been digging in the sands of Amman for years, unearthing the country's ancient secrets. They even discovered a stone axe that could be over 1,000,000 years old. Can you imagine what secrets these stones can hold? But their research is not limited to just one tomb. They also study ancient drawings on the rocks nearby. These drawings were made thousands of years after the tomb was built. What will they tell us about the lives of those people who lived here thousands of years ago? We don't know yet, but we'll definitely find out later. Necropolis in the center of Paris. In the heart of Paris, next to one of the busiest metro stations, scientists have discovered an ancient cemetery. Yes, you heard it right. It is in Paris, the city of fashion and love. Imagine that you're walking the streets of Paris and under your feet, 50 ancient graves, each of which hides its own history. And all this time they remained unnoticed despite all the construction work and even the construction of the Port Royal railway station in the 70s of the last century. Scientists were able to determine the time of burial thanks to a coin found in the mouth of one of the deceased. Apparently, the 2nd century AD was rich in important events. Imagine how many stories these people, women, men, and even children who lived in those distant times could tell. They were representatives of the Gallic people who lived in Lutetia when this fishing village was under the control of the Roman Empire. It is remarkable that these people were buried in wooden coffins from which only nails have survived to this day. Interestingly, more than half of the bodies were buried with offerings, including ceramic jugs and goblets. Archaeologists also found a complete skeleton of a pig and another small animal in the pit. Perhaps these animals were sacrificed to the gods. Archaeologists have also unearthed personal items such as jewelry, hairpins, and belts. People were buried fully clothed, and several pairs of shoes were sometimes left next to them. Scientists were able to find footprints thanks to the tiny studs used to secure the soles. The researchers say these shoes are placed either at the feet of the dead or next to them as an offering. And sometimes, a coin is placed in the coffin or in the mouth of the deceased to guarantee the soul a safe path to the underworld. Charon's obol was intended to pay for the services of a ferryman who, in ancient Greek mythology, transported the souls of the dead across the river Styx. Isn't it amazing that such an ancient cemetery went unnoticed for so long? This story reminds us that something incredible and mysterious can be hidden under every step of our daily life. Ancient Roman Sundial. Guys, are you ready to be surprised? Now I will tell you about an amazing artifact from ancient Rome, a bronze sundial in the form of pork hams. Yes, you heard it right. This amazing item was found in the 18th century at the famous Villa of the Papyri in Herculaneum. It was named pork clock or prosciutto clock, Italian for ham. The bronze ham shows a curvilinear table that helped measure the length of the shadow. The vertical columns indicate the names of the Roman month, and the horizontal lines indicate the number of hours from sunrise to sunset. Unfortunately, the pointer gnomon broke off and was lost, but in 2016, scientists created a copy of the clock using a 3D printer and added a gnomon tail to the ham. The researchers conducted experiments and found that the clock works quite well. It may seem that the accuracy of the clock is not high, but the Romans did not need to know the time to the nearest minute. Moreover, these clocks were more of a status item, like modern expensive Swiss watches. People wanted to show that they have such a thing and not just tell the time. You may ask, how did the Romans point the clock at the sun without a compass? The answer is simple. They set the vertical plane of the clock directly to the sun. Even in the distant past, people created interesting and unusual things that boggle our imagination even now. The most famous farter in the world. Have you ever heard of a man who played the flute using his ass? No? Then fasten your seatbelts because you will get acquainted with the extraordinary story of Joseph Puyol, or as he was also called, Fartomaniac. Our story begins in France when one day a little boy Joseph decided to swim in the sea, and so, having plunged under the water, he felt that his stomach was filling with cold water. Frightened, he ran ashore and water began to flow from there, but not from his mouth or nose, but from his anus. Joseph's mother, seeing this, took him to the doctor, who reassured her, saying that the boy simply had unique control over the abdominal muscles. This allowed him to fill his rectum with air or water and release them in a powerful jet. Imagine the distance of such shots, sometimes reached several meters. After school, Joseph worked for a while in a bakery, then served in the army where his comrades learned about his unusual talent. He even arranged performances for them, and after the service, he decided to show his art on the big stage. So in 1887, Joseph Puyol first appeared on the stage of the theater in Marseille, and a few years later, he won the love of the audience of the famous Moulin Rouge. He could not only release fountains from his anus, but also make various sounds of different tones. His talent was so unique that he was nicknamed Le Pétomane, which translates from French as Pardomaniac. Now imagine, Joseph could play the flute, imitate cannon shots, blow out candles from a distance of several meters, and even sing the French anthem La Marseillaise using only the power of his anus. His shows were visited by such famous personalities as Sigmund Freud, King Leopold II of Belgium, King Edward VII of Great Britain and Ireland. During his performances, audience exploded with laughter and people cried with joy, and of course not because of the smell. One of the most popular acts in his repertoire was a children's show where he, with the help of his unique talent, presented children with the voices of various animals and birds. But unfortunately, the beginning of the 20th century brought grief to Joseph's family. Two of his sons returned from the war disabled, and the third son was put behind bars. This forced Joseph to move away from performing arts and return to the baking business. Joseph Puyol died in 1945 at the age of 88 and was buried in the La Valette Cemetery. Specialists from the Sorbonne even offered his relatives a large sum of money for the opportunity to study the remains of Joseph, but they refused. And so, the body of the unique fart man still rests in the grave, keeping his incredible talent a secret. The face and phallus of the ancient Romans. We raised the anchors and set off for Spain, where archaeologists from the University of Alicante made an amazing discovery. They found an ancient carving on a rock with images of a face, a cornucopia, and believe it or not, a phallus. This discovery was made in the castle of Tossal de la Cala. Imagine, this carving hiding on the rocks has been living for about 2,000 years. In those ancient times, around 8072 BC, the area was a Roman fort where the Romans defended themselves in a civil war. This mysterious stone depicts a human face next to which a phallus and a cornucopia are carved. The carving is quite large, about 57 by 42 centimeters, but it appears to be incomplete because the top is missing. Why was it created, you may ask? It could be ancient graffiti or some sort of ritual symbol. The phallus for the Romans was a symbol of masculine strength and the security of the state, so its presence speaks of a certain protective function of the carving. And the cornucopia, which is also depicted there, is often associated with the Roman deities of harvest and prosperity. Let us recall the myth of Hercules, who plucked the horn from the river god Aeschylus and turned it into a cornucopia. So it is possible that this mystical carving depicts a god or goddess representing abundance. But this is only one of the versions. But you can write your opinion in the comments on this matter. Why do you think the phallus was depicted next to the face in ancient Rome? Did the Romans really believe that such a carving would help secure the state? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. The oldest inscription in Cyrillic. Imagine you're digging in the ground and you come across something very old. What would you do? But the scientists who recently worked in the ruins of a fortress in Bulgaria were simply delighted. They found a breastplate that is over 1,100 years old. Can you imagine how many years ago that was? And what's especially interesting is that the breastplate has an inscription on it, and it may be the oldest example of Cyrillic, one of the written alphabets we use today. This inscription is engraved on a lead plate. I think someone wore it on their chest to ward off all troubles and evil. This inscription mentions two people, Pavel and Dmitry, Who they are, no one knows for sure. Perhaps Demeter served in the fortress and Pavel was his relative. Apparently, this inscription was made during the reign of Tsar Simeon I, who ruled Bulgaria from 893 to 927. Most likely, the plate got into the fortress between 916 and 927. Prior to this, the oldest texts in Cyrillic were those that were written in 921, so this bib is something special. Perhaps scientists will soon learn more about it. Did you know that the Cyrillic alphabet originated from the Greek alphabet and additional letters were added to it for those sounds that were not in the Greek language? Cyrillic is used in many countries of Eastern Europe as well as in Central and North Asia. It was first adopted in Bulgaria as the official alphabet. Rock drawing of a boat with people. Guess what the archaeologists found this time? The answer floats in the waters of time and ancient legends, and now on the walls of a Swedish cave. In Sweden, in a place called Tanum, a real treasury of ancient drawings was discovered right on the stone. I think you will be interested to know that archaeologists have seen more than 40 different drawings on a huge surface 15 meters long. Among them were images of people, horses, chariots, and most interestingly, a large boat with people on board. I think that the ancient artists who inhabited this area about 2,700 years ago were very talented. Most likely they were right on the boats when they drew these amazing pictures, because some of them are at high altitude. At that time, this area was the shore of the fjord. And here's another interesting thing. Already a few years ago, thousands of similar rock paintings were discovered in the same region of Sweden, but their age turned out to be even older, as much as 3,700 years. And it looks like the Swedes are not the only ones with such talented artists. In Norway, in the north of the country, archaeologists have found another ancient rock drawing of a boat. Scientists have decided that it is between 10 and 11,000 years old. They believe that this is perhaps the oldest drawing of a boat in Europe and maybe in the whole world. So guys, never forget that art is not just paint and paper. Sometimes it can be a stone and an old boat and even time itself. Church of the legendary city of Rangholt. Ready to go looking for the lost city? And not just a city, but the whole northern Atlantis. Archaeologists have made an amazing discovery in the depth of the North Sea. They found the remains of the ancient city of Rangholt, which was washed away by a powerful storm many centuries ago. And the most interesting thing they found was the stone remains of a huge church measuring 40 by 15 meters. Imagine how majestic it was. Rangholt was a large and important trading city in the Middle Ages. It was a place where thousands of people lived and worked: fishermen, farmers, merchants, and even priests. Imagine the picture. Cozy streets full of people merely trading and bushing around. Salt and amber were sold there, and goods were even delivered to places as far away as Spain. But alas, it all ended when on January 16, 1362, a terrible storm wiped the city off the face of the earth. Rangholt has since become known as Northern Atlantis. By the way, a historian named Tanja Hermann assures that the people in Rangholt were very rich and paid huge taxes. The Danish king Valdemar II even recorded in his books that they paid as much as 20% of their silver as a tax to the king. These were the ancient inhabitants of Rangholt, rich and prosperous until their city was swept away by nature. So guys, the next time you think of underwater cities and treasures, think of Rangholt, Northern Atlantis, and those who once lived there before the city disappeared into the depths of the sea. Superhighway of the ancient Maya. And now we will go on an adventure straight into the jungles of Guatemala. Archaeologists have been working for the past 8 years to uncover the secrets of the ancient Maya civilization. Fasten your seatbelts, we have an exciting flight into the past ahead of us. Remember how you loved to hide in the park among the trees and bushes as a child? But what if someone hid an entire city? This is exactly what scientists have made, using a super cool technology called LiDAR. It allows you to see through the jungle, just like you can see through the water in a swimming pool. Archaeologists have found not just one city, they have discovered a network of 400 Mayan cities interconnected by roads. It's like a huge treasure map where all the islands are connected by bridges, and not just roads, but real superhighways. Researchers believe that these superhighways were not only huge, wider than even our widest freeways, but also illuminated by moonlight. Interesting, right? This all thanks to the layer of white plaster that covered the road. Can you imagine how cool it was to run along this road under the moonlight? Richard Hansen, lead lead archaeologist on the study, calls the network the world's first superhighway system. He says that these roads were like a web connecting all the cities into one big system. While Armenia and France did not use wheels or paths to get around, it is assumed that they traveled these roads on foot. Can you imagine how they moved from city to city, passing many kilometers along these superhighways? Cursed Table Mystery. Have you ever been told about items wrapped in sinister secrets and curses? So, around which incredible and mysterious events take place, confusing even the most courageous. In this video, we dive into the history of one such item. Imagine a cafe called the Delta Saloon in Virginia City, Nevada. There, under the glass dome and behind the fence, is an old table. Why a fence and a dome, you may ask? Well, it's not every day you see a cursed table. Yep, that's right, this table is considered cursed. After all, once, about 170 years ago, in the Pharaoh Casino, where the table first appeared, it brought bad luck to everyone who sat down at it. The table seemed to attract trouble. Everyone who sat down at it lost all their money. Because of this, it was even sold. The buyer was Black Jake. He moved the table to his house and occasionally hosted poker nights with friends, but the table did not bring him good luck either. A year later, he lost all his savings and committed suicide in desperation. Then the table got to the new owner, David Lips, but even he and his family couldn't escape the table's strange cursed power. In a very tragic way, in one evening, his entire family was found dead at this very table. The table, like a cursed ship, passed from hand to hand, bringing only misfortune and tragedy into people's lives. In the end, it was bought by the owner of the Delta Saloon, where it still is now. Nowadays, the table decorates the interior of the institution. It is under glass behind a fence so that no one could accidentally touch it. But it wasn't always like that. One day, the new owner, not knowing the whole story, once again set the table for the game, and the tragedies continued. Is there a curse, or is it just a terrible coincidence? We do not know. But one thing is clear for sure. This table, wrapped in sinister stories, continues to disturb and beckon with its secret. And maybe the curse isn't just a part of our belief in magic and the supernatural. Who knows? Ancient Invoice in Jerusalem. Imagine the ancient city of Jerusalem over 2,000 years ago. This is the time when the Roman Empire ruled the world. It was here, on the main street of Old Jerusalem, that scientists found an unusual stone. There were strange symbols and words on the stone. It turned out that this is an ancient invoice, a paper receipt of our time. The archaeologists were delighted. After all, this is the first such item from those distant times found right in Jerusalem. Why is it so important? Imagine what secrets this invoice can reveal. It could tell us about how people lived, what they bought, what their customs were. According to Professor Anna Evans, it is a simple object, but it reflects the daily life of the ancient inhabitants of Jerusalem. It is these little things that give us the opportunity to look into the past and see how our distant ancestors lived. This stone tablet was found in an old tunnel dug out in the 19th century. It was carved into a piece of limestone that was once part of an ancient funerary chest called an ossuary. Professor David Cohen, an expert on the history of ancient Jerusalem, says, "This find gives us valuable information about the commercial activities and economy of Jerusalem at that time. The names and numbers on the tablet indicate financial transactions, perhaps even modern forms of accounting and trade. Each new find in the city of David helps us to better understand the history of this holy place." Japanese Bunker of Horrors. I have an exciting and slightly creepy story that takes place right underground, in mysterious underground bunkers from the Second World War. In these gloomy dungeons, Japanese scientists conducted secret experiments that can only be compared to the scariest horror films. These laboratories of horror were discovered by Chinese archaeologists near the city of Anda. From 1935 to 1945, here, underground, in horrendous conditions, people were infected with deadly diseases and new types of biological weapons were tested on them. Imagine how many secrets these walls hide. It is here, underground, that some of the most feared bioweapons were born. The bunkers were built underground to prevent the spread of infections. Interestingly, the data on these experiments were handed over to the US authorities so that scientists could avoid punishment for their deeds. These secrets were used to develop new biological weapons during the Cold War. Archaeologists began exploring the bunkers in 2019 using a variety of techniques, including geophysical exploration, drilling, and excavation. But even so far, they have not reached the depth of the bunkers. Who knows what secrets are still hidden in these terrible dungeons? We will know the answer to this question in the future when archaeologists get to the most secret corners of these bunkers. 1050-year-old mysterious building. Today I will tell you about the Great Ottonian Dynasty, which about 1,000 years ago ruled in the area that is now known as Germany. Recall the lessons of history? So, right under our feet, secrets are buried that literally stun us. The Ottons were a powerful family that had roots in Saxony-Anhalt and were busy building churches, monasteries, and castles throughout the region. And today, our brave archaeologists are hard at work digging up the earth to bring to light the secrets of this dynasty. And one of these projects in Altenburg Grossbangen has discovered amazing finds. There, underground, archaeologists discovered two huge castles, the main one and the outer one, protected by moats and ramparts. These are exactly the same ones that were built during the Ottonian dynasty. And here's the most interesting thing. The main castle was protected in a way that we usually don't in the most important castles of that time. It was a separate powerful wall, which is already more than 1,000 years old. According to Felix Biermann, the scientist who led the excavations, Altenburg is a real mystery. There is an assumption that they planned to create a new base for management here, but something went wrong. In addition to the wall, archaeologists have found many artifacts: small houses, stone and clay ovens, ceramics, animal bones, knives, spears, and much more. These were some amazing secrets kept by the land near Altenburg, which is located just 250 kilometers southwest of Berlin. Dr. Parker Dental Show. Now let's talk about the man who changed dentistry. Meet Edgar Randolph Parker, born in 1872 in the small town of Tynemouth Creek, New Brunswick. Edgar, as a child, showed incredible resourcefulness when he decided to become a poultry farmer at the age of 9. Although this plan failed, Edgar did not lose heart. As a teenager, Edgar tried himself as a merchant in various things, but his father was against this idea and sold his wagon. Edgar was so upset that he decided to set sail with his uncle, who owned several ships. But fate brought him to medicine when he was injured and ended up in a hospital in Buenos Aires. Inspired by the work of doctors, he decided to become a dentist. At the age of 17, Edgar entered the New York Dental College and even tried to start a practice, which led to his expulsion from the college. However, Edgar did not give up his dream. He continued to study and ended up graduating from Philadelphia. After becoming the dentist, he traveled to Canada, where to attract clients, he launched an advertising campaign and offered a new service: painless tooth extraction, using his invention hydrocane. Edgar soon became an itinerant dentist, pulling teeth without pain. After moving to New York, he met William Beebe, a former circus worker, who offered to organize a theatrical medical show. The show began with a lecture on the importance of oral hygiene, after which Edgar pulled out a tooth from a volunteer without pain. All the spectators were delighted. Soon he had a whole network of offices and an income of $3 million a year. Edgar may have been more of a showman, but he did a lot of good things. He gave free checkups, offered payment by installments, and organized lectures on caring for teeth and gums. That's how one enterprising guy turned dentistry into a real show. The composition of ancient Roman perfume. Today we will go on an exciting journey into the past. Imagine we are researchers from the University of Cordoba, and for the first time, we managed to find out the composition of Roman perfumes, which are more than 2,000 years old. It all started in 2019 in the municipality of Cordoba, where archaeological finds were discovered during the restoration of a building. The workers turned to the city administration, and what did they find? The mausoleum is 2,000 years old, with 8 niches, all in excellent condition. The remains of 6 members of a wealthy family were buried in a common tomb, and there were many different items on them, including a quartz container with solid contents. A quartz amphora was something unusual because usually such vessels were made of glass, and quartz is a fairly hard and durable material, so it was an expensive and very rare item. But the most amazing thing was inside the amphora. It was an ancient perfume that survived thanks to the good sealing of the vessel. A team from the University of Cordoba, led by Professor Jose Rafael Ruiz Arrabal, analyzed this perfume, which is over 2,000 years old. Their findings were published in the scientific journal Heritage. The researchers used a variety of techniques to determine the composition of the perfume, including X-ray diffraction and gas chromatography. The composition of the perfume was two-component: the base or binder, which helped to preserve the fragrance, and the essence itself. In our case, olive oil was used as the base. Interestingly, according to the results of the analysis, ancient Rome smelled of patchouli, an essential oil obtained from a plant of Indian origin, Pagostemon cablin. It is widely used in modern perfumery, but its use was unknown in Roman times. So guys, this is how science decipher the secrets of the past and give us the opportunity to smell the aroma of ancient Rome. If you had the opportunity to get real jewelry or perfumes from the ancient world, not to sell and make money on it, but to wear or keep at home as a souvenir, then what would it be? Jewelry from which ancient empire do you like best? Ancient Egypt, the Roman Empire, or jewelry from China? Write in the comments below the video and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you have not done so before. Unusual punishment of criminals. Today I will tell you about an ancient Chinese punishment that will make you wince. But first, let's take a look at this photo. Do you see the fear and bleeding in this man's eyes? This powerful shot was taken by Scottish traveler John Thompson in China. The characters in the photo say, sealed by the Shanghai County Magistrate. The punishment is known as kanga. By the way, this word came to us from French and means yoke. Yes, the same thing that they put on bulls, but in East Asia, on people. Kanga is a large wooden collar worn around the neck of those guilty of crimes. It weighed from 9 to 17 kilograms and could have different shapes and sizes. Some were made so that a person could eat themselves, but other kangas limited access to the mouth. In these cases, the person was completely dependent on the kindness of others. Without help, they could not even eat or drink. Kanga was appointed for petty crimes such as theft, but this was not the only punishment. Before putting on the kanga, the prisoner was usually beaten with bamboo sticks, and then they were shown to all the people for public humiliation. It appears that kanga was an Asian version of the European pillory. People with kangas around their necks were always brought to the show when the officials came. Sometimes even the officials themselves were punished by the kanga. Wearing it could last from several days to 3 months depending on the crime. For example, for repeated theft, the thief received 60 blows with a stick and 20 days with a kanga around their neck. If something valuable was stolen, the punishment became even more severe. For every 10 strokes, another 5 days of wearing the kanga were added. So think twice before doing something bad, and remember, in the past, crimes were paid a much more serious price than today. Gilded statue of Hercules. Here's a story that any archaeologist will tell with delight. Imagine that you're digging a hole in the heart of Rome and then boom! A huge bronze finger sticks right out of the ground. It happened in 1864 in the Campo de Fiore Square, when workers were working to strengthen the foundations of the ancient palace of Palazzo Piorighetti. Having come across a huge wall and columns, they continued to dig deeper and deeper, and here a bronze finger was in the ground. So big you might think it's from a monster, but who could have expected that an entire statue was hidden underground? Archaeologists, of course, continued to excavate, and soon they found the rest of the statue, a huge bronze Hercules and a bronze lion, which Hercules defeated. But the statue was damaged, its feet were missing, and there was a hole in the back of its head. Why was it there? In Rome, there were many beliefs, and one of them said, if lightning struck something, then it must be quickly buried because the gods do not like it. Apparently, lightning struck the statue and drilled through the back of its head. Therefore, the inhabitants of Rome decided to bury it. And what about the walls and columns that the workers discovered? It turned out to be an ancient theater built by Pompeii. It cunningly bypassed the ban on the construction of theaters in Rome, first building a temple and then attaching a theater to it. By the way, now there is a restaurant where you can feel like a real Roman. As a result, the statue of Hercules was restored and placed in the Vatican. So if you're going there, be sure to take the time to have a look. Cosmetic spoon with naked girl. Raise your hands, those who love jewelry and face masks. What if I told you about a piece of jewelry that also held your favorite scented oils? Let's take a trip back to the time of ancient Egypt, where there lived a girl who could become a top model today. This girl is actually a cosmetic spoon made of ivory and ebony and painted in vibrant colors. It was a special kind of spoon used to hold cosmetics or essential oils. In fact, it was a whole tradition in ancient Egypt during the 18th and 19th dynasties. Our little model has been carved to look like a pink lotus flower with a lid that can be opened and closed. Her face is adorned with a black ebony wig and her neck is adorned with a lotus petal necklace. She wears a tattoo on her waist and dwarf gods are depicted on her hips who protected the house and family. This cosmetic spoon was found in Thebes in the early 1900s and is now in Moscow at the State Museum of Fine Arts named after Pushkin in the hall The Art of Ancient Egypt. And if you notice, our spoon girl has very long legs. In ancient Egypt, art often depicted women with disproportionately long legs. This was a kind of beauty standard of that time. Who knows, maybe they were the first models in the world. Neolithic farmer skeleton. A unique discovery happened right in the middle of a city in Poland. This is a story that will affect you because it affects the story of the person themselves. Slomniki, a small town in Malopolska Voivodeship, Poland, became the site of an amazing discovery. Imagine you are renovating a city square and suddenly you find a complete human skeleton. But it's not just a skeleton. This skeleton is about 7,000 years old. And what's the most wonderful thing? The skeleton was found in perfect condition, and pieces of ancient pottery were found next to it. They appear to have belonged to a culture known as the linear culture. You may be asking how it could be that the skeleton was left in such excellent condition. It was buried in very peculiar soil, which helped preserve it. Scientists want to conduct a special test called radiocarbon dating. This will help them find out exactly when that person lived. Now they don't even know who they were, but there are some assumptions. Scientists think that this man could be a Neolithic farmer who crossed the Carpathians and ended up in Poland. But what's really remarkable is that we still know so little about this ancient culture and their burial customs. That is why each such discovery is an opportunity to look into the past and learn more about those who lived before us. The horror of the underworld of Osiris. Today we will go on an exciting journey to ancient Egypt, where we will unravel the mysteries of the mysterious Book of the Dead. Some might think, the Book of the Dead? Is this some kind of detective story or a horror movie? But in fact, this is a collection of texts that help the dead cope with difficulties in the world on the other side of life. The Egyptians believed that after death we will travel to the underworld, which they called the Duat. It was a kind of country of death, consisting of 14 zones. Imagine the long and difficult road that must be traveled to reach eternity. But even after death, we need rules, right? This is where the Book of the Dead comes in. It's like an instruction for the dead, written on sacred papyri, sarcophagi, and even on the burial shrouds of mummies. These texts contain special spells and magic formulas that help overcome all the difficulties of the path. If a deceased person lived a good and honest life, their soul passed through all the zones of Duat without any problems and reached eternity. And now the most interesting part. Upon arrival at the Hall of True Truth, the soul will be judged, and not by any court, by Divine One headed by Osiris himself. Judgment takes place in the form of weighing the heart and the scales against the feather, the symbol of truth. And if the heart turned out to be heavier than a feather, then the soul met the terrible monster Ammit, consisting of parts of 3 dangerous animals: a crocodile, a lion, and a hippopotamus. This death-eater beast took away hearts burdened with sins and the soul came to an end. So guys, the Book of the Dead is not just a set of texts. This is a real guide to the world beyond life, a map of the road to eternity. Remember, even in the afterlife, it is worth being honest and kind. Shipwrecks of the Ming Dynasty. The following story is reminiscent of a treasure movie. At a depth equal to the height of 5 Eiffel Towers, the remains of 2 ships were found in the South China Sea. And these are not just ships, but ancient Chinese ships belonging to the Ming Dynasty, which ruled China from 1368 to 1644. This is the first time in history that China has discovered such a unique find in the underwater depth. Scientists from the Chinese Academy of Sciences believe that this find is important not only for China, but for the entire world of archaeology. This can help us learn more about the Silk Road, which was the main route for trade between China and other countries. Both ships are thought to have sunk in the late 15th or early 16th century and were found at a depth of 1,500 meters. Inside, they found a huge amount of cargo. The first ship was carrying about 100,000 items, mostly porcelain dishes, while the second was loaded with wood. And the most amazing thing is that the ships and their cargo are perfectly preserved. Thanks to this, scientists were able to easily determine what time this find dates back to. Among the discovered dishes, there are different types of porcelain and ceramics, including rare ceramics with green glaze. This find is a big breakthrough in the history of trade and culture of China at that time. Now ship research continues, and it may bring many more amazing discoveries. So guys, let's follow this exciting archaeological adventure together. 12 painted tombs of the grandson of Genghis Khan. Imagine that you are a brave archaeologist and you have just made an amazing find in the eastern part of China in the Shandong province. Your team has discovered as many as 12 ancient tombs decorated with breathtaking paintings and carvings. Their age is about 700 years. These tombs are the real treasures of the Yuan dynasty, founded by the Mongol Khan Kublai Khan, who was the grandson of the great conqueror Genghis Khan. It is important to note that this find has become one of the most significant for this part of China. According to an inscription found in the burial complex, the tombs belonged to the Go family, but the most surprising thing was discovered by archaeologists in one of the tombs where there were 2 burial chambers. There, magnificent paintings and frescoes made of carved bricks awaited them. These designs were hand-carved with chisels and wooden hammers. Until now, on these frescoes you can see herons and tree branches, symbols of good luck in Chinese culture. But that is not all. More than 60 items were found in the tombs, including earthenware and porcelain dishes, bronze mirrors, copper coins, and other valuable artifacts. This will give scientists new insights into the culture and production of porcelain during the Yuan dynasty. From world fame to poverty. I will tell you about the famous jeweler and founder of one of the most famous jewelry companies in the world, Fabergé. What do you think that makes them so special? That's right, these are their incredible Easter eggs that were made specifically for the Romanov family. Carl Fabergé himself took over the reins of the family company at a young age when he was only 24 years old. With the help of his education and experience, he was able to take responsibility for the prosperity of the family business. Under Carl's direction, the jewelers created unique items that included not only Easter eggs but also watches, medallions, cigarette cases, writing instruments, and more. They worked not only for the richest people but also for the middle class. But everything changed when the First World War began. Instead of creating magnificent products, the Fabergé company began to fulfill military orders. The 1917 revolution changed the life of Carl Fabergé even more. Instead of the aristocracy, ordinary people became customers, soldiers, and sailors, and despite the difficulties, Carl continued to do business until the fall of 1918. Knowing that nationalization was coming, he decided to hide his valuables. He handed over his treasure, a safe, the contents of which were estimated at more than 7 million gold rubles, for safekeeping in the Swiss embassy. But something went wrong, and the same night, the safe was moved to the Norwegian embassy, which was robbed. The old jeweler was left without a livelihood and he had to emigrate. From the huge fortune, which was estimated at 45 million, there was only one bag with clothes and several products. Already ill, Carl decided to take a vacation in Switzerland. One day he decided to break the rules and smoke a cigar, which led to his sudden death. That was the story of Carl Fabergé, the famous jeweler, a story of great talent and hard times. And remember, each Fabergé product is not just a beautiful object, it is a story embedded in each precious stone. And fish scale armor. Today we have an exciting journey to China where 2,500 years ago, a brave warrior was buried in amazing armor. Imagine, archaeologists are excavating in the depth of the Chinese Taklamakan Desert. They stumble upon a grave inside which lies a warrior in armor made up of over 5,000 overlapping leather scales. This costume would be so comfortable and practical that a warrior could put it on himself like an apron before dinner, only instead of dinner, there was a fight. This armor is unusual for its time and place. Researchers think that it was brought from the Middle East where this style of armor originated. The warrior who wore this armor was a man about 30 years old. Found next to him were fragments of pots, parts of horses' bridle made of horn and wood, and a sheep's skull. Such scaly armor protected better from blows and injections than chain mail and was cheaper to manufacture, but it was less flexible and did not cover as much of the body as chain mail. Such armor was worn by warriors of many cultures, and they even decorated their horses with it. The materials for the scales are varied, from bronze and iron to pangolin scales and even paper. It is very difficult to find such old armor as this one because not many of them have survived to this day. Only the armor from the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun and the armor of the Skatties are comparable in the time to this find. Scientists from the University of Zurich, led by Patrick Wertmann, recounted, and it turned out that there was 5,444 small and 140 large scales in the armor, all made from cow skin. This kind of armor was unusual for China at the time. This style was common among Persians and Skatties, and even some Greeks wore this armor, although they preferred other styles. The owner of the armor could be either an ordinary infantryman or a rider, but the presence of a bridle for a horse suggests that most likely he was a rider. He could be a local who bought armor in the West or a foreign soldier who came to fight in China in Assyrian equipment. We can only guess, but one thing is for sure, this story is amazing. Write in the comments, what do you think? Was it an ancient Chinese or a traveler from distant lands? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Ancient blueprints. And now we will go on an exciting journey into the past, where we will reveal the secret of ancient drawings, the age of which is stunning, as much as 8,000 years. Imagine huge structures that can only be seen from the air. It's not just rocks and a pile of sand. No, these are the great creations of people of antiquity, the design of which still makes us think. Scientists call them kites. These huge structures, according to one theory, could serve as hunting traps for ancient people. But what if we have the key to understanding their true purpose? Guys, meet rock paintings found in Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Their age is astronomical 8,000 years. These lines and stars adorn the rocks and megaliths that are part of our kites. But what if these drawings are not just decorations, but real blueprints according to which the ancient hunters built their huge traps several kilometers long? This is the hypothesis proposed by scientists. They compared the drawings engraved on the rocks with the shape and size of known kites. One of these drawings is on an 80 cm limestone monolith from Jordan. It is engraved with long lines crowned with an 8-pointed star. It was in such a star, presumably, that the hunters drew their prey. And the second confirmation was found in Saudi Arabia. Here, on a sandstone boulder measuring 2 by 4 meters, drawings of 2 kites were found at once, and they all have something in common: star-shaped paddocks and trap pits at the end of the star's race. The oldest burial in northern Germany. In the amazing and multifaceted Germany, in the north of the country, archaeologists visited a mysterious place, the former Duensee Swamp. Suddenly, the mysterious corner became a kind of door to the past when the researchers found an amazing burial there, which according to them dates back to about 10,500 years ago. Imagine it was back in the early Mesolithic times. Now imagine once there was a lake left after a gone glacier. Over time, it overgrown and turned into a swamp. And it was in this swamp, which has long become a disappeared lake, that archaeologists discovered a unique burial. In 1923, evidence of ancient settlements in this swamp was first discovered. Since then, many ancient artifacts have been found here, from tools to the remains of mining. They tell about life of ancient hunters and gatherers who lived here many thousands of years ago. And now scientists have found something special. This is the oldest burial in northern Germany. The remains of a person who was cremated were found in it. This is a type of burial when the body is burned. This is a hunter-gatherer who lived about 10,500 years ago at the very beginning of the Holocene epoch. During the work, archaeologists found bone fragments, some of which were charred. The burial was cut out entirely in order to study it in detail in the laboratory. Such burials are very rare in this region. A similar find is known only from Jutland, where a person was also buried according to the rite of cremation. Mysterious creature in the Arctic. Now we will go on an amazing adventure in the very heart of the Arctic, an icy desert that holds many secrets, and one of them we will reveal a little today. Meet the little monster. And although at first glance the word monster evokes images of giant scary creatures, our hero is not like that. This is a monster not in size, but in unusualness. Its size is surprisingly little, but its uniqueness, that's what makes it a real monster. This super interesting baby was discovered by American geologist James Dwight Dana back in the century before last, and he was so amazed that he named it Monstrilla. And here is the most surprising thing: modern scientists in 2014 faced the same creation. Perhaps you think it is something similar to a shrimp. Right, but the size is only a few millimeters. Our little monster has a flat head with antennae, 4 pairs of legs, and only 1 eye. And it has some more amazing features that make it even more unique. But what really amazed us is that this microcyclops was not found as a larva, but as an adult creature. You see, our little monster, despite its size, is important to our planet's ecosystem. This monster with a flat head confirmed that the eternal ice of the Arctic hides thousands of secrets, and this icy desert is like a giant refrigerator, keeping all these secrets in perfect condition. How did the first paper money appear? Long ago, during the time of the ancient Phoenicians, trading was a difficult business. To facilitate the exchange of goods, they came up with the idea of using coins as a universal medium of exchange. However, the coins were heavy and the slaves carried them using special handles. Then the Chinese came on the scene with a revolutionary idea. Around the 1st century BC, they came up with leather banknotes. They were made from the skin of white deer and marked with special marks. They could be used for purchases anywhere in the empire, and refusing to accept them cost a life. These leather money became the progenitors of paper bills that we know today. Around the 800s, the Chinese decided to try to create paper money using the woodcut technique, which is a method of engraving wood and imprinting on paper. But this flying money, as they were nicknamed, was not immediately taken seriously. After all, a paper bill could easily fly away with a breath of wind. Initially, these paper money were used as guarantees for debt obligations, but over time, they have become a full-fledged means of payment. Paper money made trading much more convenient. Merchants no longer had to carry heavy coins, and the metal could be used for other important uses. This new flying money was more like checks and was used for large transactions. In just a few decades, paper money has evolved from a credit certificate to a full-fledged means of payment, becoming what we call paper money today. Europe at that time was still immersed in the Middle Ages, but the idea of the Chinese was so breakthrough that it spread all over the world. And so, in 1601, Sweden became the first European country to print and put into circulation paper money. Thus began the history of paper money, which we know and use today. Archaeologists were wrong. Get ready for an amazing historical journey. Have you ever wondered who stands on the huge statues of ancient Egypt? Here's one story that is sure to blow your mind. Back in 2017 in Cairo, archaeologists discovered a colossal 8-meter statue. Everyone thought it was a statue of the famous pharaoh Ramesses II. However, scientists have recently concluded that this was a mistake. This majestic statue was found in the former ancient city of Heliopolis, which is now a district of Cairo. Archaeologists worked long and hard to extract parts of the statue from the mud. This 3,000-year-old piece of art was credited with depicting Ramesses II, but scientists have found they were wrong. Who's actually depicted on the statue? Meet Semiprecious I, pharaoh of the 26th dynasty. Scientists solved this mystery by reading the inscription Neba on the statue. It was the nickname of Semiprecious I, who ruled Egypt from 664 to 610 BC and made Egypt an independent state again. The Minister of Antiquities of Egypt called this statue one of the most important archaeological discoveries, and after restoration, it will take pride of place at the entrance to the Great Egyptian Museum, which will open in the end of 2023. There was an incredible story about one of the most majestic statues of Egypt, but remember, history is full of secrets and unpredictable twists and turns. The village 150,000 years old. Let's imagine ourselves in the world quite a long time ago, about 150,000 years ago. We are in Africa, the place where humans as we know them today were first born. But even today, we have many questions about how this magical story took place. Recent archaeological discoveries in West Africa help us with this, like wonderful cheat sheets on an exciting journey into the past. Scientists have discovered a settlement in West Africa which is about 150,000 years old. Stone tools have been found here that are believed to be among the oldest crafted by Homo sapiens. Imagine, these tools were used by people as much as 140,000 years ago, much longer than other groups of people. And you know what is the most amazing thing? People in Africa appeared about 300,000 years ago. They used stone tools which are called Middle Stone Age tools and used them until 60,000 years ago. So why didn't people in West Africa change their technology for so long? Some scientists suggest that when people began to move to Europe, they had to adapt to new conditions and a changing climate. Perhaps this influenced their technology. And a fact for dessert, people began to make stone tools even before the advent of Homo sapiens. We have already talked about the 1.2 million year old workshop. And another amazing discovery, some stone tools can even be made by monkeys. So don't be surprised if next time you are shown a stone tool made by a monkey. Earliest depiction of a kiss. Are you ready to dive into the world of a real archaeological detective story? Today we have a special episode about the oldest kiss in the history of mankind. Yes, you're not mistaken. We are going on a journey to the origins of Romans and perhaps even herpes. Do you know where the first kiss in history originated? Researchers from the University of Copenhagen found traces of it in Mesopotamia in the ancient Near East, and that was about 4,500 years ago. Scientists say that people were already practicing kissing back then, and this may even have contributed to the spread of herpes. It sounds a little scary, but it proves that kissing has been an important part of our lives for thousands of years across cultures and religions. Imagine, guys, in ancient Mesopotamia, people used clay tablets for writing, and some of them describe kissing as part of romantic intimacy and friendship. And even our closest relatives, bonobos and chimpanzees, also kiss. Here's your proof that kissing is not just our whim, but the basis of our communication and relationships. That's just interesting. Could the herpes simplex virus be transmitted through these very early kisses? Ancient Mesopotamian medical texts mention a disease that resembles herpes in symptoms. Of course, we can be 100% sure it's herpes, but the resemblance is amazing. It turns out that both Romans and disease connect us with ancient people much more than we could imagine. Law, order, and unexpected wealth. Do you know what to do when the money earned by honest work is not enough to live on? Our protagonist has found his unique answer to this question. Times were hard, the Great Depression ruined companies and people's lives. However, even in these difficult times, there were people who could adapt and survive. Our hero, Emmerich Jettner, a modest garbage man from New York, was already at the end of his life. His work already allowed him to barely make ends meet, and with the advent of the crisis, the situation became catastrophic. It was then that the old man came up with his own special plan. Not the most honest, but what an original one. In those days, people who were engaged in counterfeiting money were at every turn, like wolves in the forest. But our cunning old man chose a special path. He specialized exclusively in $1 bills. Well, who cares, right? After all, big fish were engaged in counterfeiting banknotes of large denominations. But our old man's money didn't turn out too good, as if the kid painted it with paint. He even spelled the president's name wrong. But as they say, everything has its end. Secret Service agents scratched their heads as they dealt with complaints about counterfeit $1 bills. The paper is the cheapest, the printing is fuzzy, the colors are faded, and that strange name of the president. However, although this is ridiculous, more than 500 such counterfeit banknotes have already accumulated over the year. Our humble master was nicknamed Mr. 880, and although the agents tried to track him, New York is a great and wide city, and the old man turned out to be extremely cautious. 10 years have passed, and no one would have known about the old man if not for the fire in the 1948. Among the cinders, they found a cliché for printing money of very poor quality. The owner turned out to be our old man, Emmerich Jettner. Amharic no longer had the strength to work and he lived in poverty, spending his fakes only on the bare necessities. He was already very old, and thanks to this and the fact that he did not deceive anyone more than $1, the court gave him a light sentence, $1 fine and a year in prison. As a result, the old man spent only 4 months in prison and was released. Here's our story. And remember, in life, there is always a place for amazing events and unique heroes. And by subscribing to our channel, you will each time learn about new finds of archaeologists and interesting stories from the past. Write your kind comments under the video and I will definitely answer them. Thanks for your views. Bye everyone!